Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For those who are new here, my name is Krys Janzen, online fitness coach, strength and conditioning specialist at the Natty Hour. In today's video, I want to take some time to talk about some very distinct differences between the lying hamstring curl and the seated hamstring curl. The reason why I think it's important for us to talk about these two variations is because direct hamstring work is essential, whether you're trying to build size, improve performance, or reduce risk of injury. And the leg curl is what most people do in order to target the hamstrings. The hamstrings contribute to hip extension and knee flexion when they contract. This is why movements like the stiff-legged deadlift and leg curl variations are often used when it comes to targeting the hamstrings. While most of the hamstrings can be targeted with hip extension movements, like the deadlift for example, total hamstring development does require knee flexion. So today, let's break down the seated and lying leg curl variations, because knee flexion is being performed in both of these movements. Therefore, we should now understand that they are going to both target the hamstring muscles. However, that doesn't mean that both movements are created equally. There is a distinct difference between both of these movements, which we will get into shortly. It is important to understand though first that the hamstrings cross the knee and the hips, where when we change our hip and our knee position during a given exercise, this is going to change the length of the hamstrings. For example here, when we go into hip extension and knee flexion, this shortens the hamstrings, which is being accomplished during the lying leg curl variation. But when our hips are flexed and our knees are extended, we are lengthening the hamstrings, which is being accomplished during the seated leg curl variation. So why does this matter? Well, research shows that there's a difference in the effectiveness of a given exercise depending on the lengthening of that muscle. More specifically, our hamstrings are going to be targeted more effectively when we can train them in a lengthened position, much like what you see when doing a seated leg curl, in comparison to being in a shortened position, which of course is what is seen during a lying leg curl. So overall, the lying leg curl is a short muscle length exercise, whereas the seated leg curl is a longer muscle length exercise. Therefore, we can expect to see greater hamstring activation, yielding a better hypertrophic response with the seated leg curl. Does this mean that you should avoid lying leg curls though? Of course not. From a practicality standpoint, this might be all that you have access to, where doing a seated leg curl, depending on your gym, it may not be available, it may not be possible. So don't think that you're going to be doomed to grow your hamstrings if all you have access to is the lying leg curl machine. But that doesn't mean that you can't get creative if you don't have access to a seated leg curl machine. I've actually touched on this in a previous video where I showed different variations of how you can set up a seated leg curl variation using cables or bands, and I've actually had to use this variation a lot in the past when I was training at a gym that didn't have a seated leg curl machine, and I actually found this variation to work quite well. Again, if that's not an option for you, you are still going to be able to see hamstring growth using the lying leg curl variation. However though, if your goals are to just maximize as much muscle growth as possible and you do have access to the seated leg curl variation, it might be a good idea to consider prioritizing this movement pattern if you have an option between the two. Thank you all so much for checking out today's video. I hope that you found it helpful. If you have any additional questions in regards to these two variations, don't hesitate to reach out, leave a comment down below, or you can send me an email, thenattyhour@gmail.com. Thank you all again so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, found it to be helpful, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.